Warning: this training contains images and video of tree incidents and near misses. If you feel uncomfortable to proceed, please inform your trainer now and exit the training.
It looks like it's stopped up here.
Righto. Tree control message. Stopping, mate.
Trees and branches are one of the biggest risks to responder safety at bushfires. They can fall without warning at any time. To manage tree risk, all personnel exposed to tree hazards need to understand: what are the consequences of poor tree hazard management? What causes tree hazards? How do you identify tree hazards? And what are your responsibilities for reducing tree hazards? Trees present serious hazards to you, your crew, and other responders. If they are not managed properly, the consequences can be serious. Let's take a look at the following response stages to learn more about them. On the way to a fire, falling trees and branches can block your route, delaying or preventing your access to the fireground. They can also fall on your vehicle, causing damage, injury, or even death. On the fireground, falling trees and branches can fall on you, causing injury or death, or even fall after the fire has passed, putting all crews at risk. They can also damage equipment or cut you off from vital equipment. Falling trees and branches can block your escape routes or compromise safety zones, putting entire crews at risk. To reduce the risk from tree hazards, you need to understand the types of hazardous trees. Trees can be classified into 5 types. Let's look at them now. Unassessed trees pose an unknown risk. Assess means to locate and evaluate the extent of tree hazard by appropriately qualified or experienced staff. After the fire has passed, unassessed areas should not be entered until tree hazard assessment and treatment is complete. Sound trees have no obvious defects which would significantly weaken the trunk or allow entry of a fire. Also, there are no large dead branches present. While these trees may have been assessed as sound, maintain situational awareness. A potential killer tree, protection assured, is a tree which in its current state does not appear hazardous, but may become a killer tree if it catches alight or is impacted by wind or other fire-related disturbance. It has a high probability of surviving the fire intact, based on the proposed protection measures and likely response resources available. These trees are also known as dot trees, as they are marked with a yellow dot. A potential killer tree, protection unassured, is a tree which, in its current state, does not appear hazardous, but may become a killer tree if it catches alight or is impacted by wind or other fire-related disturbance. It does not have a high probability of surviving the fire intact, based on the proposed protection measures and likely response resources available. Or a tree which, in its current state, may in part or wholly fall after current operations. These trees are also known as X trees, as they are marked with a yellow cross, or X. A clear and present danger tree, also referred to as a CPD tree or killer tree, is a tree or branch that is likely to fall during current operations and impact personnel in its potential impact zone. These trees are also known as K trees, as they are marked with a yellow K. To reduce tree hazards, you need to understand what causes trees and branches to fall. A killer tree is defined as a tree or branch that is likely to fall within the expected time frame of the current operation and affect personnel in its potential impact zone. Let's look at the following types of killer trees to learn more about them. Trees that are actively on fire and not able to be extinguished will be weakened to the point of failure, becoming killer trees. Also, trees that have severe structural damage due to recent fire and that appear very unstable are often killer trees. Trees impacted by other factors like ground disturbance, damage by heavy machinery, or damage from a nearby tree fall may also be classified as killer trees. Killer trees come in different sizes and are not always the biggest and most effective trees on the fireground. Trees most likely to injure personnel are smaller diameter spar or pole trees. The growth of these trees are typically stunted by a natural thinning process of forests. They may have burnt through at ground level and may not show obvious signs. Therefore, before blacking out can commence, a systematic assessment and treatment of tree hazard must be undertaken by qualified or experienced personnel. Larger killer trees that are actively burning and putting up a lot of smoke are obvious ones that most people would see and instinctively stay away from. Trees that have partially fallen over and are caught up in other trees, or trees that may have dead or hung up branches, also fit the category of killer trees. Can you identify the main causes of tree hazards on the hazardous tree shown? We'll take you through the 5 main causes now. Defects like twists, hollows, and cracks create weak points in branches and trees, making them more likely to fall, especially if they are put under additional strain in high wind conditions. Broken branches can get tangled in a tree's canopy and fall suddenly, especially in high winds. They can also put pressure on the branches supporting them, causing those branches to break and fall, especially if those branches are weakened by defects or fire or there are high winds. Fire weakens the structure of branches and trees, making it more likely they will fall, especially if the structures are already weakened by defects or put under additional strain by high winds. Strong winds, heavy rains, and landslips can weaken the root structure of a tree, making it more likely to fall. Also, agriculture and heavy machinery used near trees can disturb the soil around trees, also affecting root stability. Strong and gusty winds can cause hung-up limbs to fall. Sudden and consistent pressure on tree canopies can cause defective areas of the main trunk to fail, causing the tree to partially or completely fall. Strong winds can also cause trees to fall away from their natural lean. Any of these indicators can contribute to a clear and present danger tree or killer tree. It is your responsibility to identify killer trees. Identify means to recognize stands of or individual trees that present an increased risk to personnel safety. JSOP 8.03 requires all personnel involved in bushfire response to take certain actions. Let's look at the actions involved at each of the operational stages. On the way to the fire, identify hazards en route by watching out for the risk of falling trees and branches. Also, talk about the likely tree hazards you'll face when you get there. Communicate risks you've identified. Before passage of fire, that is, before backburning, assess for and treat potential killer trees. During passage of fire, and if it is safe to do so, identify and exclude killer trees for later treatment using yellow and black barrier tape. After passage of fire, continue to identify killer trees and do not commence works in an area until it has been assessed and treated for killer trees. Only qualified or experienced personnel can conduct tree hazard assessments, but everyone is responsible for identifying killer trees. Potential killer trees are those that present a clear and present danger to personnel. A helpful approach is to look up, down, and around. Let's look at identifying killer trees. You can see the main hazard. When looking up, make sure you look for hung-up branches, branch or trunk defects, or the effects of wind on the tree. Tree lean. The increasing degree of lean of the tree causes additional stress on defects in the tree. Crown weight. Uneven weight distribution of limbs and branches in the tree's crown can cause additional stress on its defects. It can also cause the tree to fall in an unexpected direction. You can see the main hazard. When looking down, make sure you look for exposed roots, defects in the lower trunk, active fire or smoke at base of tree, and active fire or smoke coming from the ground indicating the roots of the tree are burning. This is best done by crews on foot checking both sides of trees. You can see the main hazard. Hazard trees can be found anywhere, from individual trees to stands of trees and forests. Always assume unassessed trees are high risk, and look around for high-risk areas, including fire-killed trees, diseased, stressed, or drought-affected trees, trees beside roads and tracks, and trees near escape routes or safety zones. Identifying killer trees starts with awareness. What tree hazards exist in your ICC footprint? Consult your agency to access these maps. Once you've identified a killer tree, and if it is safe to do so, you must take these steps. Exclude the killer tree using yellow and black barrier tape. Create an exclusion zone at a distance of 2 tree lengths from the killer tree. The size of the exclusion zone could be larger or smaller depending on site conditions like slope, direction of tree lean, or the weight of the crown and potential impact area of the falling tree or limb. Create an exclusion zone with continuous tape or by putting single loops around trees on the edge of the exclusion zone. If you do not have barrier tape, remain at a safe distance and warn all approaching personnel until tape arrives. Never drive or walk through an exclusion zone. Always report the location of the killer tree to your crew leader or fireground contact. Also, communicate the location of the killer tree to other nearby personnel. Treatment can only be undertaken by experienced or qualified personnel. Treatment means to actively mitigate the risk a tree poses to personnel. This can be done through elimination, isolation, or exclusion. Removal of K trees through falling can only be undertaken by suitable plant or by accredited fallers. Only personnel or plant involved in the treatment of K trees may enter an exclusion zone for the purposes of falling the tree. Never approach trees with a yellow K on the trunk. Risk from tree hazards can change as conditions change. For example, wind and fire damage can turn previously safe trees into killer trees. Dynamic Risk Assessment, or DRA, is a continuous process that allows you to maintain safety in changing circumstances. Let's now see how dynamic risk assessment could be applied to the video we saw at the start of this training.
Do you have a fireground channel for strike team 2323?
Step 1. Evaluate. What is my task? What's going on? What are the hazards? In this case, what is the tree hazard? Has this area been assessed for killer trees? Step 2. Select. What is my plan? What am I going to do? Step 3. Assess. What are the risks of what I plan to do? For example, what tree hazards could I be exposed to? Remember to look up, down, and around. Step 4. Decide. Is my plan safe? Do the benefits outweigh the consequences? If so, proceed. If not, then modify your plan. Consider, are other personnel going to perform the same task I am? Would it be safe for them? Step 5. Modify. Can I make my task safer? If yes, then reassess your task. If no, then do not proceed with the task. Consider viable alternatives and return to Step 1. Evaluate. Step 6. Proceed. What has changed? Do I need to reevaluate my task? DRA is a continual process and should be used frequently to assess for risks as your task and situation changes. Let's look at how we could have modified this task. Step 1. Evaluate. What are the hazards? Limb and tree debris over the road serve as a prompt for an unassessed area of fire-damaged trees. Have you identified an area of killer trees? Should you exclude personnel from the area until the road can be assessed? Step 2. Select. What is my plan? What am I going to do? Did you notice the farm gate on the left-hand side of the video? This could be a safer option for crews travelling across the fire line. To ensure other personnel are not exposed to the tree hazard along the road, place yellow and black barrier tape across the road and communicate this to your fire line supervisor. Step 3. Assess. What are the risks of what I plan to do? For example, what tree hazards could I be exposed to? Remember to look up, down, and around. Step 4. Decide. Is my plan safe? Do the benefits outweigh the consequences? If so, proceed. If not, then modify your plan. Consider, are other personnel going to perform the same task I am? How can I make it safer for them? Exclude. Communicate. Treat. Responder safety is paramount. Everyone can identify a killer tree. Only qualified or experienced personnel can assess, mark, and treat hazardous trees. Killer trees are marked with a large yellow K. Exclude killer trees with yellow and black barrier tape. Always communicate the location of killer trees to nearby crews and fire line supervisor. Assessors should never mark a killer tree if not safe to do so. Never leave a killer tree unexcluded. Never drive or walk through an exclusion zone. This concludes the training section of this module. Please complete the written multiple choice assessment.